Hey guys, this is Evan with Sound Warp Studios, and today we're going to be learning about how to dial in a really crushing modern metal drum sound. This is not going to be a, download this preset and insert mix ready drum tone. This is a very complex approach to mixing drums, but it goes to show that if you really put a lot of time and effort into dialing in your drums, you can get something really extraordinary, but it's not going to be easy. So not to say you can't do something simpler. We'll probably do another video on a more simple way to mix drums that sound great, but this is a drum sound that I've spent a lot of time dialing in and lives in my mixing template. So I want to go ahead and showcase that today. So let's hop on over into the DAW and check it out. All right, so we're here in Reaper. As you can see, we've got a lot of tracks going for the drums in blue here. I'm going to do just a run through showing what each of the different individual tracks sound like, and then we'll dive into some of the processing and talk about methodology and kind of the mindset behind each of the decisions. So the main drum sound comes from Stephen Slate Drums 4. Got, the core sounds here. All the overheads are from here. We've got some other samples blended in. All of those are being sent to individual tracks. So kick, snare, toms, overhead, rooms are on their own track. And then I've also sent for the kick and snare, I've sent the MIDI just from this SSD track over to some other tracks to add extra samples to blend together actually in Reaper here outside of SSD. And I've mixed and blended those into taste. So first, let's just get a quick listen to what the song sounds like. So yeah, definitely far from a natural sounding drum mix, but if you want something really heavy that hits hard and packs a massive punch, this is a good way to do that. So let's go ahead and start at the kick coming straight out of SSD4. This is what it sounds like. So definitely hearing a lot of that classic kick 10 Joey Sturgis sounding kick in there. That is the primary sample blended in with the black kick, I believe. But that's a pretty good starting point. And then we've added in this thick kick, which is an old drum sample from this monster kick set that I've had for forever. And this is just all about the punch and low end. So that just doesn't even really sound like a kick drum. It's just like a massive thud, but it adds a ton of weight to the kick. And then I also have this one shot from Drumforge. This is what it sounds like, adding some click and attack. So that one sounds kind of silly by itself as well. But when we put all of the kicks together, this is what we get. And we'll go into more about how we got that sound. So hop on over to the snares. And if we come on over here, we're going to start with the SSD Snare 12 sound. This is what that sounds like. So that has an incredibly aggressive attack, but not a ton of body. And it's a little bit harsh sounding on its own, but when we add some of these other samples in, you'll start to see some of the bigger picture. Here's this snare ping sample to add a little bit of ring in there. And that's also from the Stephen Slate Drums 4 library. Then we've also got another drum shot sample. Again, adding even more attack. And then I felt like it didn't really have enough room sound to it. Wanted to make it sound larger than life. So I added in this room sound as well, blended it in. And then we've also got a snare verb send and a huge verb send. And then the huge verb. So a lot of stuff going on, but this is what it sounds like all together on the bus. So yeah, pretty good. Toms, really nothing too exciting. When we go through the individual tracks, I'll highlight in on a section where there are toms playing. Not a lot of toms in this song. And then last, overheads and rooms. Pretty standard cymbal sound, pretty bright, but it adds a lot of energy. And then the rooms. And it's worth noting that the overheads and the room tracks are just straight out of SSD4. So it's just the core sounds. The other samples that I added, they have room sound to them and they're on the individual tracks, but they're not going to be on this channel. So let's start kind of looking in at the processing here. So there's really a lot of stuff. Let's go ahead and expand this. We can see it in full view. Let's go ahead and start with the kick. So this is coming out of SSD. Go ahead and just kill the processing on it. So, really just sounds like kick 10. And then we'll go in, start with the virtual tape machine. This is just kind of something that I've gotten in a habit with for the kick. It's definitely not like a must-have for kick. On mastering, that's a different story. We can talk about that in another video. This is perfect for a mastering application. But for kick, it's a great starting point. It gives it a little bit extra low end, and you really can't go wrong. So bypassed. So pretty subtle, but adds a little bit of extra weight. And then most of the heavy lifting is here in the virtual mix rack. So we have the virtual channel going into the 401 compressor, a little bit of EQ here, boosting some highs, cutting some mids, adding some lows. And then we have the London virtual tube module here. This is adding some saturation. So we can go through one by one here. And then going into the compressor here, this is where a lot of the compression happens. So I love what that does to the attack, and it also makes it sound a little bit fatter as well. A lot of people don't like to compress their kicks very much, but I like to go typically pretty heavy-handed. I like the sound that it gets. And sometimes I'll even use an 1176 on here. It just depends on the sample and the track. So in the EQ, we'll do off first. So there's a pretty big change there. Cut some of the frequencies here around 4.8 kilohertz, and that removes some of the kind of unpleasant, clicky, plasticky kind of sound. Made it sound, a lot less harsh, and then boosted some highs and quite a bit of lows. And then lastly, we'll go in with a little bit of saturation. Makes it sound a little bit more aggressive, nothing major. So there's that kick. And then we'll go here to the thick kick. Like I said, this is just a one-shot sample I've loaded here into Reassemblomatic. Nothing crazy. We'll go ahead and bypass the effects. This is just the raw sample. That sample sounds completely ridiculous. Then we'll go into virtual mix rack. Not too much going on here. Just wanted to add even more low end. So this is what that sounds like. We'll bypass just the whole VMR module. So yeah, more low end. Who doesn't love an absolutely monstrous low end on their kick? And we got an EQ move. This is stock EQ. Nothing fancy, just really trying to focus the low end on this because there's so much low end in the sample down here in the lower kind of range, and cut out some of the higher lows to really focus it in. And yeah, you can just tell it just really sounds like, well, we are adding a lot of low end, but also just focusing in. We'll play that one more time. If you listen there, it even almost sounds like it makes the highs a little more pleasing because we're focusing and adding more low end. So it makes the high end sound a little bit smoother. And then lastly, JST Clip. Absolutely love this. You'll see it all over all of my drum shells. Just really gives the drums that extra bit of aggression, and also make sure that once all of the drums get to the final limiter stage on my mastering chain, that it doesn't totally kill the drum transients. On this sample in particular, it's not really doing a whole lot. I have more clipping on the bus. I'm actually not even going to play it. It's really, oh no, it's 2 times. Let's play it. Again, adds some aggression, also chops the transient off so that it handles processing better down the chain. Got the kick sample. This is just literally a one shot, nothing going on. Same here. Oh, this is muted. I ended up not using it. So that's it for drums. I guess I shouldn't say that. There's also processing on the bus itself. Let's disable this one by one. Re-EQ, just again adding a little bit more lows. Pretty subtle, but once I blended them all together, I realized I wanted a little bit more low end. I really like low end heavy kicks. And then here we got the infinity EQ, just rolling off some lows. Information down here we don't really need. Yeah, so you hear all that information below, like 32 hertz. It's just rumble. We don't need our kick making that sound. This is not an EDM electronic, style of track. So, and then JST Clip. Cannot get enough JST Clip. Absolutely love that plugin. And then let's see what we had here on this last EQ. Probably some last minute fine tuning. Even rolled off a little more lows just to make sure. And then also there's this high band around, where's this at? Right around 4K. And we'll go ahead and just toggle this. You can hear, I'm guessing, just a little bit of extra click I didn't like. This is it off. Pretty subtle, but it definitely smooths out the attack on that kick. All right, so that's the kick sound. Go ahead and jump over to the snare. There's a lot going on in the snare. I'm going to try and run through this pretty quick. So we'll start with what I'll call, I guess, well, it's not really the core sound. I got a lot on this one shot, but we'll start here straight out of SSD. Again, VTM, like this on kick and also snare. Here's with it off. To be honest, that's really not doing much. Probably was just a part of my mixing template and I left it on. Probably could turn it off, but it's in there, so we will leave it. All right, now we'll load up the virtual mix rack. Got a lot going on in here, so let's start getting rid of some of these. VCC going. Again, this is just kind of a habit, nothing too special. Pretty much use this 4KE or sometimes the Trident setting and just drive it until it's around 0 dB or so. This is kind of a holdover from my drum template. I don't use VCC too much anymore, but it's not really hurting, so could take it or leave it on that front. So let's go ahead and start with the EQ. Got a big high boost, a little bit of low boost. Here's what that sounds like off and then enabled. Absolutely night and day. I mean, really just sounds like a blanket got lifted off that snare mic. And now let's get some compression to make this sound just completely just brutal. 1176. Really just adds extra attack and also brings up a little bit of ring on the drum, which I like. And then a little bit extra compression here with the 401. just even more punch. Can never have too much punch, or can you? And then a little bit of revival, adding some low and high end. That's a pretty bright sounding snare. I probably wouldn't mix a snare that bright by itself, but as you can see, it's not the loudest sample, so it'll start making more sense here. Transify, let's open this up. And we're adding some higher mid and high attack. Let's see what that sounds like. Just making it sound even more insane. Honestly, I'm pretty shocked I've done this much transient type processing between compression and transient designers, but hey, if it works, it works, right? There's no rules. And then JST Clip looks like doing two times a lot. Let's see what that sounds like. Again, makes it sound more aggressive, brings up even more of that ring, so now it sounds pretty sick. All right, so let's go to snare ping. This is what sample we got. The Snare Breakdown 6.5. Don't know what it is, don't care, sounds awesome. This is what it sounds like raw. So definitely a more natural snare sound, right? A lot of room. We're gonna make it completely unnatural once we're done with it. All right, got a lot going on. Let's go here to EQ, a little bit of highs, cutting some low mids, a little bit of lows, before and after. Pretty subtle, but extra brightness, cut some mud, add a little bit more thump. This is where a lot of the compression is gonna be done. Well, all the compression here. So just a massive difference, as you can see. I mean, we're pushing this thing almost into the red. 6-to-1 ratio, medium attack, medium release, and a little bit of the distortion. Mix all the way up, but it is just crushing it, pulling up a lot of that ring and room sound in the snare, but also giving it a ridiculous amount of attack. And then we'll add a little bit of tube saturation to kind of pull back some of the transient and just add some nice crunch saturation sound. Pretty subtle, but this is a variation of the Snare Magic preset because, well, it's magic. It makes snares sound better. Throw it on and it always makes it, better. So, and then a little bit of revival. Again, adding a little low, a little high. I really like this plugin for drums. I'll add a little bit of it, and a little bit goes a long way. All right, and then some EQ. Probably just heard a couple of resonances I didn't love. Guessing this is in the ring, but let's listen. Yeah, so a little bit harsh kind of resonances in there. Some of the ring, just dialing a little bit of that back. All right, we'll go into Snare Sample. This is a one-shot JW Snare 4. This is what it sounds like. Sounds hilarious on its own, but this adds a ton of attack to the snare. Again, we already have a ton of body from these, so just adding more click and more attack. Here's a Snare Room. It's just a one-shot. It's the JW Snare Room 5. No processing other than the sample itself, just straight off the one-shot. So a massively compressed room sound there. I have this reverse snare for effects, but it's not part of the core processing for the snare. And then the Snare Bus. I guess I opted against that EQ, so we're just going to leave it. Then on the Snare Bus, we got Transify. Even more transient, but it sounds way better with it on. So we'll do that. Then up here, probably some harshness in the snare. Yeah, just some nasty papery sounds that really makes the snare sound a lot smoother. And then look who it is, JST Clip, because why not? So now all the snares are clipped together. Toms, let's find a tom section, shall we? Toms, nothing too magical going on here. Most of the processing is the same across all of these, and I believe tom 2 and 3 are what most of the track. I think there's a little bit of tom 4, but 1 and 5 just aren't used in this song. So we'll go through here. See compressor and some EQ, and these will mostly be the same, but we'll look at just 2 and 3. Let's solo tom 2. Not a whole lot there, but the EQ is going to be much more dramatic, cutting a ton of low mids and adding some attack. Yeah, it gets rid of all that mud, makes the tom sound more aggressive and cuts through. And then we'll just look at tom 3. This is going to look a lot of the same. Just do on and off. But yeah, really focuses in that tom, gets rid of a lot of the mud. Then we'll come over here onto the bus. Got some EQ just rolling off the lows again, trying to clear up headroom, make room for, other low-end instruments. And then TDR Nova. Let's see what's going on here. All right, so we got some dynamic EQ, dynamic compression. This looks kind of like a dynamic EQ, and it's called a dynamic EQ, right? But I mean, it has ratio and all of the standard multiband compression controls, so it's pretty similar. But there's a static EQ pan just cutting out around 5K, just some nasty sound on the drum, and then controlling some of the low end on the tom so it doesn't clip our master. So these are what the toms sound like. So yeah, nothing earth-shattering, but I'm not a huge fan of toms anyways. There's not a lot of toms in this song, so it's good enough, right? And then lastly, overheads and rooms. Here's what the overheads sound like without processing. Oh, and let's get out of this loop. Get a section that has more than one cymbal sound, right? All right, so EQ, rolling off some of the low end we don't need and cutting some harshness here. Again, pretty subtle, but just didn't like a frequency right there in the upper mids. Here's where more of the magic happens. So this compressor is really where we're going to start hearing some stuff, and we're adding a lot of level, so it's going to get louder here. So I love the sound of the FG Stress on cymbals. This is this overhead wakey wakey preset. absolutely love it. Slams these pretty hard, mix at 50%, and just makes the cymbals have like more sustain. And I really just, it just sounds like it's hit harder and in a nicer room. So I love that on cymbals. DF Excite, this is a pretty interesting one. Cymbal preset. The only thing we're working with is the treble band here. And just dial the drive to like, what, 10-ish? So not a ton, but just a little bit to add some high-end sizzle. So yeah, even though it's only, up to 10 out of, I think, 100 on the dial, that is not subtle at all. And then we get one more EQ here. And as I kind of expected, that added some kind of harshness. So we're going to cut that out here with an EQ. Oh yeah, that's pretty major. There on the hi-hat. Yeah, right there at 4K, that sounds way smoother. All right, then rooms. What do we got? Let's bypass the EQ. We got drum room nuke. Oh, we're adding a ton of levels, so let's just bypass the module. Yeah, so that is quite literally nuked. But I typically like the sound of just crushed rooms, get a lot more sustain on all of the drums. It sounds crunchy. And this is just focusing in the sound. These rooms, a lot of cymbal sound and low end that we really don't need. Again, I like my rooms to be kind of a mid-range sound and just crush them. So this is what it sounds like before and after. So yeah, that cuts out a lot of the cymbal sound and also gets rid of a lot of the rumble from the kick that we already have enough low end on the close mics themselves, so we don't need the low end from the rooms. All right, so that's all the processing. And then last but not least, here on the drum bus, we have some more processing. And this really is actually not subtle. I would not love the drums as much with this processing off. So we'll walk through it here. This is a virtual mix bus, Brit 4KE. This is the bus version of it instead of the channel. Pretty subtle, but I like what it's doing there. Could probably live without it, but I think it sounds better with it on. And then this is where the magic really happens on the drums. So this is the Slate FG Gray, this aggressive preset. It's a variant of that. We have the attack at 3, release on auto, 4:1 ratio. And then you'll see the mix is blended in at about 50%, but we're going to just pin this needle and listen. We'll start with it off and then add it in, and you'll just see how much better it sounds once it's on. Just listen to how much aggression it adds. You can hear the compressor pumping, the cymbals pumping. Pumps a little bit on the low end, but man, in the mix, it sounds so much better with this on. I always put this on my drum bus. Sometimes I do more or less mix. Sometimes I'll play with the high pass filter to not react to the lows. But this is a key part of the drum sound. And then finally, JST Clip. This is on there because without it, it actually clipped the bus. So this is literally on 0, but it just prevents it from going over. Or maybe it's not even doing that. This is doing nothing. But hey, JST Clip, like I said, you can't have too much of it. So that's how to dial in a pretty insane drum sound. We'll give it one last listen here, soloed and in the mix. All right, and that is a walkthrough of my pretty complex drum process. This is, definitely not something that I would do on every mix, but this is a drum sound that I've refined over the years and ends up being a really great starting point for any track that either uses 100% sample drums or even sample augmentation. I can easily just load all of this in, adjust the routing, remove samples that I don't want. But it's a really good starting point. So hopefully you guys learned a thing or two and are able to follow along. If you're still listening in, I appreciate you staying till the end and watching this. More content coming out soon. Next, we'll do a much more basic drum mixing tutorial with not a lot of plugins, and then more stuff on the mixing process. So if you have any comments, questions, make sure to leave a comment down below. If there's anything you'd like to see me do more, whether it's drum or mixing or mastering related, let me also know in the comments. And until next time, have a good day.